We all know the story of Rome, right? The mighty legions, the grand Colosseum, the emperors who ruled the known world. It's a tale of power, glory, and a civilization that shaped our own. But what if I told you there's another story, a darker one, hidden right beneath the cobblestone streets of the Eternal City? A world so terrifying that few who entered ever came out, and those who did were forever changed. This is the story of Rome's forgotten underworld, its prisons. Forget everything you think you know about prisons. The Roman concept was entirely different. These weren't places for rehabilitation or serving a sentence. No, Roman prisons were waiting rooms, holding pens. They were tools of absolute control, designed for one purpose: to break you. Imagine being dragged from your life, not knowing your crime, and thrown into a place carved deep into the earth. This wasn't a cell block, it was a tomb for the living. The Mamertine prison in Rome, one of the most infamous, was little more than a stone pit. Prisoners were often lowered through a hole in the ceiling, a one-way trip into darkness. Once you were down there, the outside world ceased to exist. There was no sunlight, only the dim, flickering light of a torch, if you were lucky. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp stone, unwashed bodies, and despair. The cold was a constant companion, seeping into your bones from the wet ground and stone walls. There were no beds, no blankets, just the hard, unforgiving floor. You were completely isolated, cut off from everything and everyone you had ever known. Your family, your friends, they might not even know where you were. You simply vanished. And in this darkness, you waited. But what were you waiting for? That was the most terrifying part. You didn't know. There was no trial date, no sentence length. You were at the complete mercy of the authorities. You could be there for a day, a week, a year, or a lifetime. Maybe you were waiting for your public execution, a spectacle for the Roman masses. Or maybe, just maybe, you were simply waiting to be forgotten, to waste away in the filth and the dark. The psychological torment was as relentless as the physical discomfort. Chains were a common feature, but not just to prevent escape. Escaping from a subterranean pit was nearly impossible anyway. The chains were a constant, heavy reminder of your powerlessness. They clinked with every small movement, a soundtrack to your captivity, whispering that you were no longer a person, but property. The guards held absolute power. Their whims could mean the difference between a crust of bread and starvation, between a moment of peace and a sudden beating. There was no one to appeal to, no rights to claim. Your life was entirely in their hands. This constant uncertainty, this perpetual state of fear, was the true punishment. It was a calculated form of torture designed to erode the human spirit. Fear that you would die in this hole, your name and memory erased from the world. For the Romans, justice was swift and often brutal, but the period before that, justice was a unique kind of hell. It was a system engineered to make you feel less than human long before your body finally gave out. Think about the prisoners held in these conditions. They were a diverse group. Political enemies of the emperor captured foreign leaders like Vercingetorix of the Gauls, common criminals, and even early Christians who refused to renounce their faith. For them, time lost all meaning. Day and night blended into one long, continuous nightmare. The only markers of time might be the infrequent delivery of meager rations, a bit of stale bread, a sip of dirty water. Survival became a primal instinct. The fight wasn't just against hunger or cold. It was against the crushing weight of hopelessness. Some prisoners, like the Apostle Paul, found strength in their faith, writing letters that would go on to influence billions. But for most, there was no such comfort. The darkness didn't just hide them from the world, it forced them to confront the darkest parts of themselves. The isolation could drive a person mad. The constant threat of violence, the sounds of other prisoners suffering, the sheer inhumanity of it all was a crucible that few could endure. What kind of person emerges from an experience like that? When we look at the ruins of Rome today, we see the remnants of its grandeur, but we must also remember what lay beneath it. These prisons were the hidden engine of Roman control. A stark reminder that the foundations of great empires are often built on unimaginable suffering. They weren't just buildings. They were psychological weapons. They represent the dark side of power, the price of order, and the terrifying reality for those who found themselves on the wrong side of Roman law. The story of Rome is incomplete without acknowledging this abyss, this world where hope went to die, and from which very few voices ever returned to tell the tale. What happened next when a prisoner was finally brought out of the darkness? The possibilities were grim, and each one reveals another layer of the Roman system of justice and punishment. From brutal interrogations to public spectacles of death. The end of a prisoner's wait was often just the start of a new, more public horror. The journey from the silent darkness of the cell to the roaring crowd of the arena is a story in itself, and one that shows just how central fear and power were to the Roman world. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into Rome's hidden history fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll explore what came after the prison walls. Step into the world of ancient Rome, a civilization renowned for its magnificent architecture, complex laws, and military might. But beneath this veneer of order and grandeur lies a darker, often overlooked reality, the Roman prison system today. We re-pulling back the curtain to explore the grim and brutal conditions that awaited those condemned to Roman incarceration. This isn't the Rome of emperors and senators. This is the Rome of the forgotten, the damned, and the desperate. Forget what you've seen in movies. Roman prisons, or asterisk carceres asterisk, were not places of rehabilitation. They were holding pens designed for one purpose: to confine individuals until their trial, their execution, or until they simply wasted away. The very concept of a long-term prison sentence as a punishment was largely foreign to the Romans. Instead, the prison was a terrifying limbo, a prelude to a final, often fatal, judgment. Let's begin with the physical space itself. Picture a small, windowless stone room, deep underground. This is the typical Roman cell. It's damp, cold, and perpetually dark. Sunlight is a forgotten luxury. In these subterranean chambers, the passage of time becomes meaningless. Day and night blur into an endless, suffocating twilight. There's no ventilation, and the air is thick with the stench of human waste, sweat, and despair. Now, imagine this tiny space, not with one or two occupants, but crammed with dozens. Overcrowding was the norm. People were packed in so tightly that there was barely room to sit, let alone lie down. Personal space was a non-existent concept. You were pressed against strangers, sharing their filth, their sickness, and their fear. The floor, made of rough, unforgiving stone, was your only bed. It was often wet, with groundwater seeping through the walls, or from the lack of any sanitation. There were no blankets, no pillows, no comfort of any kind. Sleep, when it came, was a fleeting escape on a cold, hard surface, surrounded by the moans and rustling of other wretched souls. And then there were the chains. Most prisoners were shackled, not just upon entry, but for the entire duration of their stay. Heavy iron manacles would be fastened around their wrists and ankles. These chains were rarely, if ever, removed. They bit into the flesh, causing raw open sores that would fester and become infected. The constant weight exhausted already weakened bodies, and the clanking of iron was the relentless soundtrack to life inside the prison. For those deemed particularly dangerous or important, even more brutal restraints were used, sometimes chaining them directly to the wall or to a large block of stone, rendering any significant movement impossible. In such a crowded and unsanitary environment, disease was an ever-present and lethal threat. There were no toilets, no running water for washing. Human waste accumulated in corners, attracting rats, flies, and all manner of vermin. This created a perfect breeding ground for illnesses like dysentery, typhus, and cholera. With no medical care available, a simple infection or a common sickness could quickly become a death sentence. The sick were not segregated. They were left to suffer and die amongst the healthy, accelerating the spread of disease. The strong preyed on the weak, and survival depended on sheer brute luck. One of the cruelest aspects of the Roman prison system was the matter of food. The state did not provide sustenance for its prisoners. Your survival depended entirely on the charity of others. If you had family or friends on the outside who were willing and able to bring you food and water, you might live. They would have to bribe the guards just for the privilege of passing a small parcel of bread or a flask of water through the cell door. But what if you were a foreigner, a slave, or simply someone without a support network? They would wither away, their bodies consumed by hunger, ignored by guards and fellow prisoners alike. Compassion was a resource more scarce than food itself. Imagine the crushing weight of uncertainty. You don't know when your trial will be, or if you'll even get one. You don't know what your fate will be. The silence of the prison, broken only by the sounds of suffering, could drive a person mad. The endless waiting, the darkness, the isolation, it was a systematic process of breaking the human spirit. For many, the mental anguish was so profound that death came as a welcome release. The prison itself became a torture worse than any execution. And death was a common visitor. Many prisoners never even made it to their trial or scheduled execution. They succumbed to starvation, disease, or the sheer brutality of their confinement. When a prisoner died, there was no ceremony, no record. Their body would be unceremoniously dragged out, often to be tossed into the Tiber River or thrown into an unmarked pit. They vanished from the world as if they had never existed. This was the ultimate expression of Roman power, the ability not just to kill a person, but to erase their very memory. Famous prisons like the Mamertine prison in Rome stand as chilling testaments to this reality. Situated near the Roman Forum, this ancient dungeon was said to have held some of Rome's most notable enemies. Its lower chamber, the Tullianum, was a place of particular horror, described by the historian Sallust as disgusting and terrible by reason of the filth, the darkness, and the stench. It was here that condemned prisoners awaited their final moments, often by strangulation. So, when we think of the Roman Empire, it's essential to remember this hidden world of suffering. The prisons were a reflection of a society that, for all its legal and cultural advancements, had a stark and unforgiving view of justice for those on the wrong side of the law. It was a system built not on reform, but on retribution, fear, and the cold, hard reality of human disposability. The story of the Roman prison is a grim reminder that the foundations of even the greatest empires are often cemented with the silent suffering of the forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of history's darkest corners. If you found this exploration fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden parts of the past. Let us know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like us to uncover. Until next time, stay curious. Imagine standing before a Roman prison. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone and despair. For most who entered these gates, this wasn't a place of rehabilitation. It was a waiting room for death. Very few prisoners ever left Roman prisons alive. Execution was the most common fate, a stark reminder of the empire's brutal efficiency. Roman justice didn't value mercy. It prized fear and public obedience. Executions weren't hidden away. They were public spectacles, staged in arenas and forums, designed to broadcast a powerful message to every citizen. This is the price of defiance. The purpose was terrifyingly simple: to remind the population of the consequences of disobedience. Some prisoners faced a quick end. Others were made into horrifying examples. Crucifixion was one of the most feared punishments, a slow, agonizing, and public death designed to strip away every last shred of dignity along with life itself. Depending on their crime and social standing, others might be beheaded or executed in less visible ways. But once you were imprisoned, status rarely offered protection. Power, rank, and wealth often vanished behind those cold stone walls. Was there any hope of escape? Release from a Roman prison was incredibly rare, a near miracle. But even for the few who were freed, life was never the same. They didn't simply return to their old lives. Their bodies were often broken, weakened by disease and malnutrition. Their minds were permanently scarred by the trauma they had endured. Former prisoners lived in a state of constant fear of being rearrested on a whim, fear of a false accusation, fear of speaking a single word out of line. The shadow of the prison followed them long after they left its walls. Roman prisons were more than just physical buildings. They were psychological weapons. They existed to crush dissent, to control entire populations, and to maintain order through sheer terror. If you were a political prisoner, your situation was especially perilous. A single, unfounded accusation, a carelessly spoken word, or a perceived insult to someone in power could land you in a dark cell. The truth was often irrelevant. Confessions were frequently extracted through brutal means. In the Roman system, justice was flexible, but power was absolute. The prison system was a cornerstone of the empire's stability, not because it was fair, but because it was feared. Behind the grand monuments, the triumphal arches, and the magnificent aqueducts that we admire today, there existed a hidden world of suffering. Countless forgotten lives were spent in darkness, in chains, often without trial, without any record of their existence. Many prisoners simply vanished from history, their names lost, their stories erased, as if they never were. History remembers the emperors, the generals, and the great victories, but it rarely remembers the countless individuals whose suffering made that power possible. Today, you can still visit the remains of Roman prisons. You can walk through silent stone corridors, see the collapsed cells, and touch the rusted iron fragments that once held people captive. These ruins no longer hold prisoners, but they hold a powerful memory. They are a stark reminder that civilization and cruelty have often existed side by side. They teach us that empires were not built on glory alone, but on control, fear, and silence. The Roman prison system was not some accidental byproduct of a vast empire. It was a deliberate, carefully maintained, and brutally effective machine of control. Its legacy extends far beyond the borders of ancient Rome. It serves as a timeless warning of what can happen when power operates without accountability, when fear is used as a tool of governance, and when the humanity of individuals is sacrificed for the sake of order. These are the pages of history that are rarely taught in school, the stories that are seldom discussed. But they matter. They matter because they reveal the true cost of empire and the immense human suffering that is so often hidden behind the facade of greatness. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a darker side of Roman history. If you found this exploration thought-provoking, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments what other hidden histories you'd like to uncover. Until next time, stay curious. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe to our channel. There are so many more unheard voices waiting. Thanks for watching.